is the Rosetta Stone. It was the key to understanding Egyptian hieroglyphics, and it is one of the most precious and valuable treasures of the British Museum.
For over 200 years, the Rosetta Stone has been seen as the key that unlocked ancient Egypt. Scholars thought every detail had already been uncovered.
So we have this very interesting interaction between these languages. We think that the text probably originally is a Greek text because to honor the pharaoh as a god.
But when cutting-edge AI scanned its surface deeper than the human eye could ever reach, something terrifying came to light. What was revealed is not a correction of history, but a revelation carrying a darker weight. The stone's surface suddenly told a story that left experts questioning everything they believed. Join us as we delve into the mystery of this ancient stela. What is the Rosetta Stone? The Rosetta Stone has always stood as one of the most important discoveries in history. Yet its appearance and story reveal details that many do not expect. When it was first catalogued after being discovered in the Egyptian town of Rosetta, and later handed over to British troops in 1801, it was described simply as a black stone with 3 inscriptions. This description would lead to a long misunderstanding about its true nature. Once the stone reached London, people wanted the ancient writing on it to be more visible. To make the inscription stand out, white chalk was rubbed into the carved letters. To further protect the surface from the constant touch of curious visitors, it was coated with a layer of carnauba wax. That layer deepened the color, making the stone look almost completely black. Because of this, it was wrongly believed for many years to be made of black basalt. Centuries later, when the stone was cleaned in 1999, all of those early additions were removed. This cleaning revealed its original appearance for the first time since it had been discovered. The dark gray shade of the rock could be seen again, along with the natural sparkle of its crystalline surface. A faint but striking pink vein running across the top left corner also became visible. With this fresh look, geologists were able to study it closely. By comparing the stone to rock samples from Egypt, they discovered it closely matched granodiorite taken from a small quarry at Gebel Tingar, on the west bank of the Nile near Elephantine in the Aswan region. The pink vein, in particular, was a known feature of the granodiorite from that area, leaving little doubt about its true origin. The stone itself is a large, heavy block. It stands at a height of about 3 feet and 8 inches. It measures 2 feet 5 inches wide and has a thickness of just over 11 inches. Its weight is immense, about 760 kilograms, which equals roughly 1,680 pounds. For such a plain-looking object, its physical presence is impressive, and one can imagine the effort it took to move it from Egypt to Britain in the early 19th century. What makes the Rosetta Stone so remarkable are the 3 different scripts carved into its surface. The top portion contains ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. These were written in a form called Middle Egyptian, which was already an old-fashioned style at the time. In fact, it was not the everyday language people spoke, but rather an archaic version chosen for religious and formal texts. Below this, the second section is written in the Demotic script, which was the common written form of Egyptian used during the Ptolemaic period. This script reflects much more closely the spoken language of the time. Finally, the third section at the bottom is written in ancient Greek, which was the administrative language of Egypt under the Ptolemaic rulers. The polished front surface of the stone carries these inscriptions, lightly incised and well-arranged, while the back is left rough, since it would not have been seen once the stele was put in place. The stone that we see today is only a fragment of what once was a larger stele. Later searches in Rosetta failed to uncover any missing pieces. Because of the breakage, none of the 3 texts carved on it are fully preserved. The hieroglyphic section at the top has suffered the most. Only the last 14 lines remain visible, and all of these are damaged on the right side. 12 of them also show damage on the left. leaving the text badly incomplete. The middle section with the Demotic script has survived better, with 32 lines still visible. The first 14 of those are slightly damaged on the right, but otherwise much clearer than the hieroglyphs above. The Greek section at the bottom is the most extensive, containing 54 lines. The first 27 of these remain in full, but the lower part of the stone is broken off diagonally on the right, leaving the rest increasingly fragmentary. By comparing it with other similar steles from the same period, scholars have been able to imagine what the original Rosetta Stone once looked like. One important comparison is with the Decree of Canopus, erected in 238 BC under Ptolemy III. That stele measures over 7 feet in height and 32 inches in width, carrying 36 lines of hieroglyphic text, 73 lines of Demotic, and 74 of Greek. Because the lengths of the texts are so similar, it is estimated that the Rosetta Stone originally carried an additional 14 or 15 lines of hieroglyphs above the surviving portion. This would have added about 30 centimeters, or 1 foot, to the height of the stone. Besides the missing text, the upper part of the original stele likely contained artwork as well. Other steles of this type usually included a carved scene showing the king being presented to the gods, a symbolic image of royal authority and divine favor. Above that scene, a winged disc often appeared, a traditional protective emblem in Egyptian art. The Rosetta Stone, as it survives, lacks these elements, but their presence can be confidently imagined based on surviving examples like the Canopus stele. Taken together, the details of the Rosetta Stone reveal both its importance and its fragility. It is not simply a block of stone, but a carefully designed record meant to convey authority and ensure understanding across different languages. Let's take a look at what the inscription on the stone says. The Decree. The great stone slab was raised in honor of King Ptolemy V after his coronation. Upon its surface, a decree was carved, setting in place the worship of the young king as a divine figure. This command was not made directly by the king himself, but by a large gathering of priests who met in the ancient city of Memphis. They recorded the date in both the Macedonian and Egyptian calendars, placing the event on the 27th of March in the year 119.6 BC. The inscription described it as the 9th year of Ptolemy's reign, and even listed the names of priests who held office at that time. Among them was Aietos, son of Etos, who carried out sacred duties connected to Alexander the Great and the royal line of Ptolemies. The record also honored priests dedicated to Berenice Euergetes, Arsinoe Philadelphos, and Arsinoe Philopater, women of the dynasty who were venerated like goddesses. The decree, however, created some confusion, for a second date appeared in the text. In the Greek and hieroglyphic versions, another day was given, the 27th of November in the year 197 BC, which marked the official anniversary of the king's coronation. The Demotic text introduced another version, placing the decree and the anniversary only days apart in March. No one is entirely certain why these records did not match. What remains clear is that the order was written in 196 BC, and its goal was to strengthen the Ptolemaic hold over Egypt during a time of deep unrest. The background of the decree was tied to years of turmoil. Ptolemy V Epiphanes, son of Ptolemy IV Philopater and his sister wife Arsinoe, had become king as a small child. Both of his parents' lives were claimed in a plot involving his father's mistress, Agathoclea. After their demise, the conspirators, with Agathoclea at their head, ruled in the boy's name, but their control collapsed when a rebellion led by General Tlepolemus broke out only 2 years later. The enraged people of Alexandria turned on Agathoclea and her family, dragging them to their end. Tlepolemus then assumed power as guardian of the child king, but he, too, was eventually removed in 201 BC. replaced by Aristomenes of Elysia, who was the chief minister when the decree was drawn. While Egypt was torn by internal struggles, dangers pressed from beyond its borders. Antiochus III of the Seleucid Empire and Philip V of Macedon had made an alliance to divide Ptolemaic territories. Philip captured islands and cities in Caria and Thrace, while Antiochus struck a decisive blow at the Battle of Panium in 198 BC, seizing Coele Syria, which included Judea. In the south, Egypt faced another challenge, a powerful local revolt that had begun during the reign of Ptolemy IV. Leaders named Horwenifer and later Ankwenifer held firm against the crown, and their resistance dragged on for years. Against this backdrop, the boy king was officially crowned at Memphis when he was only 12 years old, 7 years after his reign had technically begun. The decree was issued shortly after, aiming to project strength and stability. Unlike the grand declarations of earlier pharaohs, this decree was not the king's personal voice, but that of the priesthood. Such stelae were unique to the Ptolemaic age. They resembled practices of Greek cities, where communities themselves honored rulers rather than waiting for rulers to proclaim their greatness. In the text, Ptolemy was praised for acts of generosity. He had offered silver and grain to the temples. Also, he was credited with managing the overflowing Nile, which had risen particularly high in the 8th year of his reign. By ordering the excess waters dammed, he helped farmers protect their crops. In return, the priests promised loyalty, agreeing to honor him alongside the gods and to celebrate his birthday and coronation each year. The decree further ordered that the text be displayed in every temple of Egypt, written in 3 scripts: hieroglyphs for the gods, Demotic for everyday record-keeping, and Greek for the government. The priests of Memphis were especially powerful, for they were the highest religious leaders in the land and carried influence across Egypt. By issuing the decree at Memphis rather than Alexandria, the political heart of the Ptolemies, the young king sought to win their support in a visible way. Even though the rulers of Egypt spoke Greek since the days of Alexander the Great, the decree's Egyptian texts reminded the people that their language and traditions were being recognized through the priesthood. The stone slab, therefore, was more than a carved monument. It was a political tool, a religious promise, and a declaration of survival during one of Egypt's most unstable periods. It bound the crown and the priesthood together in mutual benefit, and displayed in 3 languages the attempt of a young king to secure control over a fractured land. However, translating the decree into modern languages has always been a challenge. No single version can be treated as absolute, since scholars continue to refine their understanding of the ancient scripts. Early translations made by E.A. Wallace Budge in the early 20th century and by Edwin R. Bevan in the 1920s can still be found, but they are now considered outdated. More recent work, such as R.S. Simpson's translation based on the Demotic text, offers better insight. Another detailed modern version, published by Quirk and Andrews in 1989, presents all 3 texts with an introduction and facsimile drawing, giving a fuller sense of the decree's significance. But how did the Rosetta Stone enter British hands? The claim, from coast to coast. French forces under Napoleon Bonaparte entered Egypt in 1798 with more than just soldiers. Alongside them was a group of 151 technical experts, known as the Commission des Sciences et des Arts, who studied history, science, and art. Their mission was to explore and record the wonders of Egypt, while the army pushed forward with military goals. A year later, in July 1799, something incredible happened near the port city of Rosetta, today called Rashid. Soldiers commanded by Colonel Daupoul were working on the defenses of Fort Julien when they pulled down part of a wall. Among the rubble, Lieutenant Pierre-François Bouchard noticed a stone slab covered with inscriptions. Both he and de Hautpoul realized at once that it might be significant. They quickly informed General Jacques-François Menou, who was then based in Rosetta. The slab was later reported to Napoleon's new scientific institution in Cairo, the Institut d'Egypte. One of the members, Michel-Ange Lancret, wrote a report explaining that the stone carried 3 distinct inscriptions. The top one was in hieroglyphs, the bottom in Greek, and the middle one in a script that was then not well known. Lancret suggested that the 3 texts were versions of the same decree. Meanwhile, Bouchard arranged for the slab to be transported to Cairo so scholars could study it in detail. News of the discovery reached the wider world in September 1799 through Courrier de l'Egypte, the official newspaper of the French expedition. The article noted the potential importance of the stone, hinting that it could help one day unlock the secrets of hieroglyphs. By 1800, 3 members of the commission created ways to reproduce the texts carved on the stone. Among them was Jean-Joseph Marcel, a printer and linguist, who first realized that the middle text was not Syriac, as some had believed, but the Egyptian Demotic script. Nicolas Jacques Conté, an artist and inventor, came up with a clever technique to use the stone itself like a printing block to create copies of the inscription. Another scholar, Antoine Galland, produced prints using a slightly different method. These copies were sent to Paris by General Charles Dugois, giving European scholars their first chance to examine the mysterious inscriptions. When Napoleon eventually left Egypt, French troops continued to hold their ground against British and Ottoman forces for another year and a half. In March 1801, British forces landed at Abu Qir Bay. Menou, who had taken command of the French expedition, moved his troops and the commission north, carrying with them the stone and other antiquities. They clashed with the British but were defeated, forcing them to retreat to Alexandria. There, the French army was besieged, and the stone ended up inside the city. Menou surrendered on the 30th August that same year. After the surrender, arguments broke out over the future of the French discoveries. The collections included artifacts, natural specimens, maps, notes, and drawings. Menou insisted these belonged to the Institut d'Egypte and refused to hand them over. British General John Hely Hutchinson stood firm, refusing to lift the siege until the treasures were surrendered. Scholars Edward Daniel Clarke and William Richard Hamilton, who had just arrived from England, inspected the French collections in Alexandria. They found far more than had been declared. Clarke later wrote that the French had hidden many items. Hutchinson declared that everything now belonged to the British Crown. But French scholars resisted, even threatening to destroy their discoveries rather than give them up, drawing a dark comparison to the burning of the Library of Alexandria. Clarke and Hamilton pleaded with Hutchinson to allow some items, such as natural history specimens, to remain with the French scientists as personal property. Hutchinson eventually agreed, but when Menou tried to claim the stone as his private possession, Hutchinson rejected the idea outright. After long discussions, the transfer of items, including the stone, was included in the formal capitulation of Alexandria, signed by representatives of the British, French, and Ottoman sides. The details of how the stone left French hands remain uncertain. Colonel Tompkins Hillgrove Turner, the officer assigned to escort it to Britain, later claimed that he personally took it from Menou and carried it away on a gun carriage. Clarke, however, gave a different story. He described how a French officer secretly led him, his student John Cripps, and Hamilton through the back streets behind Menou's residence. There, hidden under protective coverings among Menou's baggage, lay the stone. The officer feared it would be stolen if left in view of the soldiers. Clarke reported that they informed Hutchinson immediately, and the stone was taken into British control, possibly by Turner, with his gun carriage. Turner sailed with the stone to England on the captured French frigate HMS Egyptienne. arriving at Portsmouth in February 1802. His orders were to present it and the other collected antiquities to King George III. The king, represented by War Secretary Lord Hobart, directed that the slab be placed in the British Museum. Before its final placement, Turner arranged for it to be shown to scholars at the Society of Antiquaries of London, where he was a member. On March 11, 1902, the stone was presented and discussed at a meeting of the Society. Thus, a chance discovery made during fortification work in Egypt ended up changing the course of history. What began as a stone buried in the wall of a small fort near Rosetta became a prized object of study in Europe. Its inscriptions, copied and carried across nations, opened the way for scholars to eventually decipher the ancient language of the pharaohs. From the moment Bouchard spotted it among the rubble to its arrival in London, the journey of the stone was shaped by battles, rivalries, and determination, marking it as one of the most extraordinary finds of its time. So, of what significance was it? Let's find out. Unlocking the mystery. For many centuries, the language of ancient Egypt remained a mystery. The words carved into their temples and monuments stood like locked doors, unreadable to the world. After the fall of the Roman Empire, the ability to read hieroglyphs slowly disappeared. Even before that time, the script had grown so specialized that only a small group of priests and scribes could understand it. By the 4th century AD, hardly anyone in Egypt could read the old symbols. The spread of Christianity into the land and the end of the temple priesthoods brought an end to hieroglyphs being used in daily or ceremonial life. The very last known hieroglyphic inscription was made at Philae. It is called the Graffito of Esmet Akom. Not long after, the final text written in Demotic script also appeared at Philae. After this, the Egyptian writing system disappeared from daily use, leaving only strange pictures and symbols carved into stone to puzzle later generations. Although the pictures of hieroglyphs remained, their meaning was lost. To Greek and Roman observers, the writing looked decorative, very different from their alphabets. This view influenced later thinkers. In the 5th century, a priest named Horapollo wrote a book called Hieroglyphica. It described nearly 200 glyphs and gave meanings to them. People believed his work to be trustworthy, but much of it was wrong. Instead of helping, it created centuries of confusion, making the puzzle even harder to solve. In medieval Egypt, Arab scholars tried to study the ancient writing. During the 9th and 10th centuries, figures like Dulnun al-Misri and Ibn Washia compared hieroglyphs with the Coptic language still used in the churches of their time. In Europe, attempts to unlock the writing went on as well. Pierius Valerianus in the 16th century and Athanasius Kircher in the 17th century worked on the problem but never reached the right answers. Kircher even described it as the riddle of the Sphinx, showing how mysterious it seemed. Everything changed with the discovery of the Rosetta Stone in 1799. This single slab of black granodiorite carried 3 different texts of the same decree. One in Greek, one in Demotic, and one in hieroglyphs. For the first time, scholars had a direct key that could link a known language to the mysterious Egyptian scripts. Still, progress was not immediate. Even the Greek part posed difficulties. Scholars knew ancient Greek, but the type used in Egypt during the Ptolemaic age had official and religious terms that were unfamiliar. Early translations often struggled with this context. In April 1802, Stephen Weston presented an English translation of the Greek text, though it was far from perfect. Meanwhile, copies of the inscription had been made in Egypt. 2 of these got to Paris in 1801. Gabriel de la Porta Duteil, a librarian and antiquarian, began translating the Greek text, but he was soon sent away on Napoleon's orders. His work was left with Hubert Pascal Amilhon, who managed to complete the first published translations of the Greek section in 1803. He released them in both Latin and French so that more scholars could read them. Around the same time in Cambridge, Richard Porson focused on reconstructing the damaged lower right corner of the text. His reconstruction was widely shared. At Göttingen, Christian Gottlob Heyne created a Latin translation that was considered more reliable than a Mailhans. This was printed in 1803 and later reprinted in 1811 alongside other important documents, including Weston's earlier English translation. Attention also turned to the middle section of the stone, written in Demotic script. At that time, this writing was little known. Swedish diplomat Johan David Åkerblad had already been studying it from other examples found in Egypt. He believed it represented a kind of cursive form of the Coptic language, though its connection to Coptic was limited. His studies caught the attention of the French Orientalist Antoine-Isaac Sylvestre de Sacy. In 1801, Sylvestre de Sacy received one of the early prints of the Rosetta Stone. He quickly noticed that the middle section was in the same script Åkerblad had been examining. The two men began working together, treating the Demotic script as an alphabet. They compared the lines of this middle text to the Greek one, looking for names that would appear in both. By the following year, Sylvestre de Sacy had managed to identify 5 names, including Alexandros, Alexandria, Ptolemaios, Arsinoe, and Ptolemy's royal title, Epiphanes. Åkerblad went further, publishing an alphabet of 29 letters based on his observations. More than half of these turned out to be correct. Yet, despite this progress, they could not go much further. What they did not realize was that Demotic was not purely alphabetical. It contained phonetic signs, but also ideographic and symbolic elements that did not match directly to sounds. This mixture blocked their progress. Still, these early steps were crucial. They showed that parts of the ancient Egyptian scripts could be matched with known languages, and they laid down the foundation for later discoveries. Decades later, with steady work by many scholars, and finally the breakthroughs of Jean-François Champollion, the lost language of Egypt would at last be unlocked. What once seemed an eternal mystery began to open up slowly after centuries of failed attempts. And what they were able to put together was unbelievable. The breakthrough. Sylvestre de Sacy, after giving up his direct work on the stone, still left behind an idea that shaped the path toward its unlocking. In 1811, while talking with a Chinese student about the Chinese script, he remembered earlier thoughts put forward by others. Georg Zoega, years before in 1797, had suggested that foreign names carved into Egyptian hieroglyphs could be written phonetically. Even earlier, in 1761, Jean-Jacques Barthélemy had pointed out that the characters placed inside cartouches in hieroglyphic texts were likely to be royal names. These earlier sparks stayed alive in de Sacy's mind. So, when Thomas Young, the Foreign Secretary of the Royal Society in London, reached out to him in 1814 about the Rosetta Stone, de Sacy advised him to look carefully at the cartouches. Inside them, there might be Greek names, and from these, phonetic characters could be recognized. Young followed this direction and made progress that would set the stage for what came later. He found in the hieroglyphic part of the stone a sequence of characters that matched the sounds PTOLMES, which today is read as PTWLMYS. This was used to represent the Greek name Ptolemaios. What struck him even more was that these symbols bore strong resemblance to characters in the Demotic script, which until then was believed to be totally separate from hieroglyphs. Looking deeper, he identified up to 80 points of similarity between the hieroglyphic and Demotic sections of the stone. From this, he correctly concluded that Demotic writing was only partly phonetic, while also containing ideographic symbols drawn from hieroglyphs. These findings were published in 1819 in a long article on Egypt for the Encyclopaedia Britannica, where his insights gained wide notice. Yet even with these steps forward, Young could not carry the work much further. Around the same time, Young reached out to Jean-François Champollion, a teacher in Grenoble with deep knowledge of ancient Egypt. Champollion would eventually become the central figure in cracking the script. In 1822, he examined copies of inscriptions from the Philae obelisk, where the names Ptolemaios and Cleopatra had been marked by William John Banks. From these, Champollion identified phonetic characters spelling out the name Cleopatra. Using these, along with the foreign names on the Rosetta Stone, he quickly put together an alphabet of phonetic hieroglyphs. On September 4, 1822, he completed this work, and soon after he presented his breakthrough to the Académie royale des inscriptions et belles lettres. In a detailed letter written the same day to Bon-Joseph Dacier, secretary of the Académie, he laid out the discovery with care. A key point he made was that phonetic hieroglyphs were used not only in Greek names, but also in Egyptian ones. This was later confirmed when he recognized the names of pharaohs Rameses and Thutmose inside cartouches at Abu Simbel in 1823. These inscriptions, older and more significant, had been copied by Banks and sent to him by Jean-Nicolas Huyot. With this confirmation, Champollion moved beyond the Rosetta Stone itself, drawing from many other texts. He began to develop a full grammar of ancient Egyptian and a dictionary of hieroglyphs. These works were completed after his passing in 1832, securing his role as the pioneer who had truly unlocked the writing system. After Champollion's breakthrough, attention shifted toward a fuller understanding of the Rosetta Stone texts by comparing all three versions closely. In 1824, Antoine Jean Letronne, a respected classical scholar, promised to create a fresh and literal translation of the Greek text to aid Champollion. Champollion, in return, set out to analyze the points where the three texts diverged. But his passing in 1832 left this work unfinished, and for a time it was thought lost. Later, after François Salvolini, his former student and assistant, passed away in 1838, missing drafts of this analysis were found among his papers. This discovery revealed that Salvolini's own publication on the stone, issued in 1837, had been plagiarized from Champollion's work. With these drafts recovered, Letronne was able to finish his commentary and his French translation, which finally appeared in 1841. In the decades that followed, others added their contributions. During the 1850s, German Egyptologists Heinrich Brugsch and Max Ulemann created revised Latin translations from the demotic and hieroglyphic parts of the text. The first English translation appeared in 1858, carried out by three members of the Philomathian Society at the University of Pennsylvania, spreading the knowledge further across the scholarly world. Still, debate grew over which version of the decree was the primary one. Letronne had argued in 1841 that the Greek version, produced under the rule of the Ptolemies, was the original. Others disagreed. Later scholars pointed out that the hieroglyphic version was meant for the gods and the priestly class, making it central in meaning. Some suggested that all three texts had been created at the same time, reflecting different traditions joined together. Another view saw the decree as a blending of three voices: political, religious, and practical. There was also the complication that the texts did not match word for word. The hieroglyphic inscription occasionally moved away from formal older language and slipped into expressions closer to demotic, which was the script priests commonly used in daily affairs. This unevenness explained why the work of decipherment was harder than first imagined. Those early scholars who expected a direct bilingual dictionary hidden in the stone were often left frustrated. The Rosetta Stone held the key, but the key itself required patience, comparison, and years of layered discovery before the ancient Egyptian world could be read once more. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.